I think everyone's heard of the Gundam franchise at some point. It's pretty much the quintessential mecha anime. There's one entry in the Gundam franchise that I have a lot of mixed feelings about. That entry is the sequel to Gundam Seed, which is called Gundam Seed Destiny. The reason why is that I consider Gundam Seed Destiny my favorite Gundam series. It does a lot right and hits a lot of the right chords. But at the same time, this series pisses me off to no end because of what it got tragically wrong. To explain why, I'm going to have to analyze the entire story, so consider this a major spoiler warning for both Seed and Seed Destiny. The setting these two series inhabit is called the Cosmic Era. It's a strange world where G-forces aren't a concern for anyone, and giant robots are seen fit to wield swords. The military regulation haircut doesn't exist, and to be the best, you have to be lanky and underweight, because muscles are for pussies.
Na 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 na, na 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 na, goodbye, goodbye.
And it's where Japanese idols are revered the world over, and can even be influential state figureheads. Story-wise, humanity begins genetically engineering offspring to have superior traits, which are called coordinators. But not everyone was on board. Looking to escape persecution, coordinators left Earth to colonize space. They named their space colonies plants, and called their government and military Zaft. Back on Earth, the most powerful nations formed the Atlantic Federation, and tensions between Zaft and the Federation led to war. This is where Gundam Seed starts up. I want to focus on Seed Destiny's story, however, so here's a quick synopsis of Seed. It's a standard hero's journey story, starring a reluctant protagonist, Kira, who happens to be a coordinator. Through circumstances beyond his control, Kira gets mixed up in the war and ends up piloting a Gundam on board the Federation ship Archangel. Meanwhile, his childhood friend Athrun is a Gundam pilot for Zaft, making them enemies. Kira remains a reluctant protagonist for a long time, lamenting his position to the point that he devolves into Shinji from Evangelion. Eventually, the tension between Kira and Athrun boils over. At his lowest point, Kira meets Lacus, our influential pop idol. Aware of the merchandising contract between Bandai and Sunrise Studios, Lacus gives Kira a new Gundam to get back into the fight with a newfound sense of purpose. That purpose being to team up with Athrun and Kira's long-lost sister, Kagali, to fight both armies and end the war. And that's Gundam Seed in a nutshell. Gundam Seed Destiny takes place 2 years later. My first impression of Seed Destiny is that it's well-paced and engaging, balancing a good mix of action, politics, and drama. It feels like it has a sense of purpose from the very beginning, whereas Gundam Seed's plot kind of meandered for a while before finding its sense of purpose. The musical score is beautiful, and I'm ashamed to admit that even the J-pop in the end credits sequences is kind of enjoyable. Before getting to the story, let's talk about the characters. First we have the crew of the Minerva, made up of Shin, Athrun, Rei, Luna Maria, and Gladys. Shin is the main character. He's a coordinator who began as a refugee when his parents and sister were killed during the events of Seed. He goes through the series blaming Orb, his home country, believing that it's because the leadership valued its ideals over the safety of its people. 2 years later, he re-emerges as Zaft's star Gundam pilot. What I like about Shin is that they didn't just make him another Kira. To begin with, he's not a reluctant protagonist. Right from the beginning, the anime establishes him as proactive and resolute. He wants to change things, and damn it, he's gonna do it. More interestingly, he's a very flawed character. He's cocky and lacks restraint. While his resolve is to do the right thing, that resolve can be misguided, and for some reason, no one taught him how to correctly hold a gun. Next is Athrun, who makes a return from Gundam Seed. He's kind of reserved and has a strong personal sense of justice. He's often conflicted because he's unsure of what the right course of action is. Then there's Rei, who's a side character who's got a bit of mystery to him. He has a quiet sense of duty and never complains. He also serves as Shin's voice of reason and tries to rein him in when he goes too far. Then there's Luna Maria, also a side character, who's competent enough but is soon overshadowed by everyone else, though she makes somewhat of a comeback late in the series. If I were to describe her personality, I'd say girly, kind of spunky, somewhat impressionable. Her characterization was largely ignored until late in the series. I wish they did more with her, as I think her character had more potential than she got credit for. Then there's Gladys, who is the Minerva's captain. She's a strong and capable character all around. She acts very professionally, isn't a pushover, has a strong sense of duty, but sometimes follows her conscience over her duty. I hate to use the cliche term of strong female character, but I personally feel she warrants it. It feels like she was written as a character first, while not forgetting that she's a woman either. Outside of the Minerva, you have Durandal, who is the leader of Zaft. He always pursues diplomacy over force, but isn't afraid to use force when necessary, and he knows how to pick his battles. So a very speak softly and carry a big stick approach. He's confident and charismatic, and also comes across as very reasonable. He's particularly skilled in persuading people to see his point of view. Then, returning from Seed is Kagali. She's the leader of Orb, and is an emotional train wreck. She's uptight and naive, and has no confidence. This isn't helped either by the fact that Shin's antagonism really gets to her, and she spends the first third of the series being constantly negged by this asshole. Her actual contribution to the story is debatable. She's one of those characters, where others want to take action on her behalf, but she actually doesn't do much herself. Then there's Neo. Whoa. Who is the leader of the Phantom Pain.
The comrades I've lost won't stop hurting.
He exists because he can't have a Gundam series without a masked villain. He also serves as the rival to the Minerva, but he actually isn't all that important to the story, and his backstory is kind of stupid too. And also returning from Seed are Kira and Locus. Let's just get this out of the way that I hate these two as a character in Seed Destiny. They are easily the ugly zit on the entire series. In terms of characterization, they are indistinguishable from each other. Their beliefs, goals, personalities, even dialogue are so blurred together that you can just say they're one character in two separate bodies. And they lack any kind of arc in Seed Destiny. Their arc was concluded in Seed, and Seed Destiny saw fit to go no further. The Kira and Locus at the beginning of Seed Destiny are the same Kira and Locus at the end of it. Even as static characters go, they are simultaneously uninteresting and infuriating. The story frames them as having no flaws, and they are always on the moral high ground. Never does their character experience any doubt, any inner conflict, any nuance. They constantly agree with each other on everything. Shit, they never even so much as get angry. Locus just stares vapidly at Kira and responds to everything he says with So with that out of the way, let's get into the story. There's an entire 50 episodes to it, but don't worry, I'm not going to cover every point. But it begins on a planet where Athron and Kagali are visiting Durandal over concerns about his weapons program. Before long, the Federation's Phantom Pain comes to raid the planet and steal said weapons, which turn out to be Gundams.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Funnily enough, this is exactly how Gundam Seed starts out, so there's kind of a lack of originality here, but I forgive it though, because unlike in Seed, this actually isn't the inciting event, but a prelude to it. Shin then shows up in his Gundam with a pretty flashy introduction, and engages them while Minerva backs him up. As far as action goes, this first taste is pretty good. It's fast and dynamic, and the action actually conveys the characters' states of mind as they fight. The real inciting event begins a few episodes in, when terrorists take the ruins of a destroyed plant and send it on a collision course with Earth. The Minerva and our protagonists try to blow the plant to pieces, but the damage will still be done. And as far as inciting events go, this is about the most effective one I've ever seen. Right away, the scope feels large and all-encompassing, because you can see the impact this event will have on the entire world, pun intended. It's visually striking, and full of human elements and emotion. Even the sappy music adds to the gravity of the scene, and all of this is done without exposition. Around this point, we're also introduced to a shadow organization on Earth called Logos that plans to pull strings and fan the flames of war. They're basically this universe's version of the Illuminati. As a side note, when a story has a sort of Illuminati, I prefer the way it's portrayed here, wherein they didn't plan the tragedy, but instead seized it as an opportunity after the fact. But anyway, after this, the Minerva lands in the ocean and sails to Orb to return Kagali, who's been tagging along until now. Now, if you haven't seen Seed first, I'm sure you'd be wondering by now, what the hell is Orb anyway? It takes center stage in much of the story too, so why is it so important? It's such a weird name, first off, especially when you consider this is supposed to be Earth. But it's actually a fictional country, one of many that presumably exist. But then, you also realize that this is a small island nation in the Pacific, and it's a world leader in technology. So if you haven't guessed by now, Orb is Japan. Well, not technically. I'll explain in a bit, but I get it. Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny are very Japan-centric. Now, I have nothing wrong with injecting a bit of national pride in a work of fiction. We all know some American movies do it too, but it just feels like it doesn't belong here. I mean, the scope is about a world war with huge factions. Orb really only has a bit part in it, and this story is obsessed with Orb. Even when Orb is out of the fight and the entire world is at stake, the characters will not shut up about Orb, even going so far as to say the world is doomed if Orb doesn't survive. The only character that just wants to put Orb behind him is Shin, and the story frames this as a bad thing. Anyway, I mentioned that Orb is not technically Japan. The world map puts Orb nowhere near Japan, and parts of it actually have a more Western aesthetic. But the parallel is obvious. I don't know, maybe the creators were trying to avoid being accused as having a Japan-centric bias or something? Like, okay guys, I know it sounds like Japan, but it's totally not Japan. Are you looking to get away from it all? Is the Atlantic Federation bringing you down? Then come to Japan, Orb! See the sights, sample our fine cuisine, watch your family get blown up in the crossfire. Ah, shit. I'm so sorry. Fuck. Anyway, it's around this point that you see some diplomacy, politics, and conspiracies before finally boiling over into war and starting the action back up. We see Shin unlock his seed, which isn't as dirty as it sounds, but if you saw a Gundam Seed, you'll know it's some ultimate thing in human evolution where a person enters a state of hyper-awareness. If you haven't, well, guess you're shit out of luck. Gundam Seed Destiny won't tell you. But we see a bit of foreshadowing when Gladys and her XO wonder why Durandal personally assigned the Gundam to Shin, and they think that maybe Durandal's background and DNA analysis might have something to do with it. Meanwhile, Athron is restless about the whole situation. He wants to help somehow, but he's unsure of what the right course of action is, so he goes back to space to meet with Durandal again. There, Durandal convinces Athron to rejoin Zaf, but as a Faith agent, which means he's like an elite operative who's outside the chain of command. He even gets his own Gundam, and is assigned to the Minerva as Shin's superior, much to Shin's dismay. In fact, Shin is outright belligerent with him at first. You kinda want to punch the guy for how much lip he gives his superior officer. So they have an antagonistic relationship at first, but they grow to like each other. Classic formula.
You are still dangerous. You can be my wingman anytime.
Bullshit. You can be mine.
But unfortunately, this relationship doesn't last very long. I think they should have explored it more personally, but once Shin's accomplishments start overshadowing Athron's, he loses his respect of him. You'd think that Athron would eventually turn this around and correct Shin's perspective, but this doesn't happen. Later on, the story breaks them up, and they don't talk on even terms until the epilogue. And even then, their issues are never actually addressed. They're just kind of assumed to be reconciled. On the political side, Durandal keeps Zaft reined in, only fighting battles that keep Zaft from looking like the aggressor. As a result, Zaft's image is really high to the point that they even gain popular support on Earth. This portrays Durandal as the sort of leader that understands that wars must be won both militarily and politically. It's good stuff. Meanwhile, we see what Kira and Lacus are up to. Oh good. Before they're attacked by Zaft special forces in what's assumed to be an attempted assassination. So Kira springs into action with his tactical expertise. He then hops in the Gundam he had left over from Gundam Seed and thwarts the assassination. Unfortunately. This serves as the inciting event that puts Kira and the Archangel back in the story. They also pick Kagami up along the way, redefining her role in the story in the process. Again, if you haven't watched Seed first, you'll be wondering by now who is this character anyway, and why is he important? He was apparently Athron's war buddy, but Kira's been completely inactive in the story until now. He just stares out at the sea or to space and feels disturbances in the Force. Then he'd say weird shit like, Whatever the case, Kira loves Orb, and Orb is now being roped into the war. So what does he decide to do? He charges headlong into battles between Zaft and the Federation, and proceeds to shoot up everyone on both sides. Do I need to say how stupid this is? But it's okay, because Kira doesn't directly kill a single person in the process, because we wouldn't want any moral ambiguity with his character. This happens multiple times too, to the point that even Athron gets sick of this shit. It's right here, by the way, where the dumbest line in the series is uttered. Oh, well now we've gone too far. You're right, we have to put a stop to this. Like, I know that Kagali and Athron are an item, but I think the war is a little more important than Kagali's feelings. What this development does give us, at least, is that Shin begins seeing Kira as an obstacle to overcome. He studies his strengths, weaknesses, and tactics. Kira's Gundam is also better than Shin's, and Shin still hasn't reached his full potential, so he has his work cut out for him. See, in war, you have a job to do. So when an upstart faction barges in and starts fucking everything up, you can't expect to just ignore it. I don't care how much of a conscientious objector this faction thinks it is. Shin understands this. Unfortunately, I don't think the creators did. What this is meant to look like is that Shin is now falling to the dark side or something. Athron disapproves of this plan, but who cares? Shin's preparation pays off and he actually does defeat Kira. But of course, Kira doesn't die. But the important thing is that Shin's development in both character and skill keep progressing. He gets a shiny new Gundam to kick ass in and reach his potential with. Later on, he's even made a number of Faith alongside Rei. Athron, on the other hand, gets more and more disillusioned with the direction Zaft is taking. It's eventually revealed that Durandal's a villain when Athron gets tipped off that he's to have false charges levied against him so they can throw him in prison. So Athron escapes, taking a member of the Minerva's crew with him, who happens to be Lunamaria's sister. So Shin and Rei fly out to stop them, and Durandal himself has ordered them to kill if necessary. So now Shin faces a major character dilemma. Obviously Shin doesn't want to kill Athron, especially since Lunamaria's sister is with him. Rei, who is Shin's voice of reason and restraint up until this point, actually urges him to kill him, because the ends justify the means. With only a few moments to think, Shin decides to kill them. Athron and Lunamaria's sister survive though, but Shin doesn't know that yet. Feeling guilt, Shin tries to sympathize with Lunamaria, and they're both so overwhelmed with emotion that they end up becoming romantic with each other. This kinda seems weird considering Shin just killed her sister, but I think there's something to this. Lunamaria is trying to make sense of what just happened, and she has no idea who she should blame. Shin is agonizing over his decision, and the war is really taking its toll on him. These are kind of broken people now, and this is a coping mechanism for them both. That's not to say there isn't any sincerity in their relationship, because I think there is. Could it have been handled better? Maybe, but I don't think this development is invalid either. So now the stage is being set for the final string of battles. Okay, seriously? We're near the end of the series, and the war has reached its climax. I think at this point there's a bit more at stake than Orb. Orb should just be a tiny blip on Durandal's radar. No, scratch that. Orb literally is a tiny blip on the radar. No, you stupid asshole! You're the ones trying to stop him, not Orb! Why would he care about Orb? Oh, fuck you! So, since Kira and Athron no longer have Gundams, Lacus once again remembers Bandai's merchandising contract and just pulls some new Gundams right out of her ass for them. Seriously, the only explanation given is that she has a Gundam factory now. How did she get a factory, and where did she get the people to work it? Shut up and buy her new model kits, that's how. So after this, Kagali gains control of Orb again and sets it back on the right path. Whoop-de-doo. If you've been watching this series up to this point, you might have gotten a sneaking suspicion that Shin's importance in the plot has gradually been diminishing over time. Sadly, you would not be wrong, as we are finally getting to see Destiny's gravest sin. For all intents and purposes, Shin is no longer the main character. Kira is, because he can do no wrong. Even the opening credits acknowledge this. Shin's just fallen to the dark side, I guess, because fuck him. All his character development, all his inner conflict and lingering doubts that led up to this point are just thrown away and have no payoff. So let's just close out Durandal's analysis now. His end goal is twofold. First, to destroy the Illuminati, which has been the source for all the warmongering. Second, is to enact his Destiny program, a plan where the state controls the exact genetic makeup of every person so they have a predetermined function in society, a destiny if you will. The rationale is that everyone would have a meaningful place in a society that validates them, so sort of like a genetic supercommunism, New World Order hug box or something. Now, end goal aside, I actually find Durandal a really compelling villain. It's easy to write a villain like Hitler who just wants to march his nation into war. Up until we started seeing him act really shady, Durandal's message was always that of peace, diplomacy, and minimizing the loss of life on both sides. And up until later, there was no reason to think his message was disingenuous. Although hardly misguided, he's right on a lot of things. He recognizes that the warmongering elite are mankind's true enemy. He even makes commentary on how the military-industrial complex profits from war, and that the typical hippie notion that war is just caused by fear and hate is just used as an excuse to further the goals of the rich and influential. Usually you see anti-war fiction just stick to the fear and hate angle. Having a villain who the audience might be in agreement with on a lot of things is good writing, if you ask me. So in a bold move, Durandal publicly denounces the Illuminati and doxes every single one of them, resulting in them all getting swatted, and even gets a large portion of the Federation to defect to him. Durandal actually goes up against this universe's Illuminati, and wins. Yeah, it was achieved through propaganda, but he wasn't wrong. They did exactly what he claimed they did. But then you have Kira and Lacus' team saying stupid shit like this. Yes, it is! We saw it happen! A secret organization worked in the shadows to incite full-scale war! Look! The last surviving member is still doing it! Look how many people he's killing!
Look at the bones!
Look, if Durandal's ideology is dangerous, go after the ideology. Don't try to obfuscate the real issues so you can make some kind of commentary on the nature of war. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, though. Making things as abstract as possible is kind of what anime does. So let's just get to the ending. The ungodly abortion of an ending. The characters act completely out of character, and many of their actions only serve as plot convenience so that Kira and the Archangel can take center stage. For one, Durandal takes up a throne like he's Emperor Palpatine now and just starts indiscriminately firing weapons of mass destruction at people. He even has Shin brought to him so he could tempt him to the dark side like he's Luke Skywalker. I really don't like what Durandal's story led up to. Did he really need to turn out to be a mass-murdering psychopath? At the beginning, he was like a Roosevelt or a Churchill, but now he's just a Hitler or a Stalin. And now you have Gladys thinking Durandal's plan and methods are the right thing to do, even though she's been objecting to them ever since the incident with Althron. You'd think using the Death Star would have been the last straw, but no. Instead, she goes after the Archangel, saying,
Archangel!
Okay, not once was it ever hinted that Gladys was in this out of a sense of honor or patriotism. She even scoffed before when Durandal made her a faith member because it just didn't matter to her. This new character motivation just comes way out of left field, but they only did it because they wanted the Minerva to duel with the Archangel. Then Rey fights Kira one-on-one, and is now somehow skilled enough to square off against him, for no other reason than to mirror Kira's final battle in Seed.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
But of all the characters this ending gives the shaft to in terms of character development, none got it worse than Shin. He's kept out of half the battle for one, but it doesn't matter anyway because Shin has zero impact on the plot by now. When he does get out, he ends up fighting Althron for a bit, and that's it. That's all he contributes. He doesn't even do anything in the final episode. During his fight, he even attacks Luna Maria when she gets in the way, when just moments ago he was cursing Althron for harming her. So why does Shin attack Luna Maria? Because Shin hallucinates his dead sister floating in front of her Gundam's face, and reacts by trying to kill her. I can't make this up. But Athron strikes Shin down before it's too late, and then just fucks off. This is an utter betrayal of Shin's character. And just to add insult to injury, he's just left lying in a scrap heap and crying as the rest of the battle plays out. Shin fighting Athron didn't even have any consequence. Athron just went on to continue what he was doing before with no hindrance. Shin could have had a heart attack before the battle, and Athron could just have leisurely cruised through space and nothing would have been different. So after all that, Kira and Durandal meet face to face and point guns at each other. Then Rey, Gladys, and Athron all show up, and now they're all pointing guns at each other. The standoff is then broken, and Durandal gets shot. By Rey. Because a single line from Kira earlier had convinced him of the error of his ways. So Rey, a side character who would have even destroyed the world if it meant victory for Durandal, decides otherwise because of like 3 minutes of screen time with a character he had no history with whatsoever. Then Gladys decides to stay behind with Durandal and Rey because she will personally deliver their souls. So now she's talking about the supernatural when her character has been nothing but pragmatic up until this point. Kira and Athron just walk away like fucking weirdos before they die in the explosion. Then after all is said and done, Shin and Kira meet face to face, and Kira offers Shin a handshake as consolation, and Shin cries. The end. I don't know what happened. It's like they were about to finish the series, fired the writer, and then replaced him with someone who had a hard-on for Kira. So, my final thoughts. One of Gundam's recurring themes is how there's a lot of gray area when it comes to war. Though let's be honest, Gundam isn't exactly the grittiest of war fiction. There's a lot of melodrama and angst plastered all over the horrors of war. As a veteran myself, I find its approach to war kind of laughable, but you gotta take it for what it is and enjoy it on those merits. As much as the series left a rotten taste in my mouth, I can't bring myself to dislike Gundam Seed Destiny as a whole. Yeah, a bad ending can ruin a story, but is that the case with Gundam Seed Destiny? I don't know, to be honest. The ending dropped all pretenses of nuance and moral ambiguity, but what Seed Destiny gets right, it gets right. It conveys a very personal sense of emotion throughout, and Shin served as a pretty good bridge to connect the audience with that emotion. Shin was completely squandered in the end, though. He was the main character, and he should have remained the main character. This was Shin's personal journey, and he should have been the one to close it out. As much as he sucks, Kira could have been utilized better as well. This was a definite case of a previous main character upstaging the new one instead of passing the torch. How much more sense would it have made if instead of barging into battles and shooting everyone up, Kira instead tried to uncover the truth about Durandal? Then when they got too close to the truth, the Minerva could have been ordered to take them out. That would have been a better place to focus Kira too. But nah. Late in the series, Lacus just has one of her extras find an old notebook off camera that revealed Durandal's whole plan. No big deal. When Kira fought Durandal, Shin should have been the one to take the lead. Shin had doubts about Durandal ever since Athron split from the group, and he had major misgivings with the Destiny program. So it's not like having a change of conscience would have been out of character for him. How much more dramatic would it have been if Shin chose to fight against the person who believed in him the most? I'm not saying it had to play out this way, but all the elements were already there to make a much more satisfying conclusion. Instead, we witness Shin's downfall, with which he has no redemption. When he just gets owned like a punk, only to be given a handshake afterwards, he didn't resolve his arc. Athron and Kira forced the resolution on him. So, with all sincerity, fuck you Kira, and fuck you Athron. You two ruined the series. Despite all its flaws though, Gundam Seed Destiny still remains my favorite Gundam series to date. It's a story worth telling, and its characters were worthy enough to be treated better than they ultimately were. It's just a shame that it could have been much more than it ended up being. So, that's all I have to say on this subject. This is Suprentis, signing off.